Thank you very much, Carla, and thank you for all of you and for inviting me to share with you some of my concerns, eventually also some proposal to go forward and trying, as you said, just not to have this fantastic exercise that I've been following the last session, but I've been familiar with the program since the beginning, just not to have it an exercise of preaching to the converted. Which is also very important, because when it makes all of us even more convinced and stronger in some way. But it cannot remain just preaching to the converted exercise. And we all know that the reason why we are here together is exactly to think and find a way to go forward, or eventually to go more public. Because one of the point, and that is, just let me tell you, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a researcher, I am not a social activist, I am a politician. And I think that the issue you are discussing is so complex that needs complex solution, and every part of the society has its own role to play. Researchers have their role to play, activists and social workers have their role, politicians should have their role, which is not always the case, let me put it mildly. So I would just to share to you a few things that I'm really strongly convinced. I am personally very committed to open society, to democracy, to good governments, to the organization of an environment where individuals have their rights and duties, and where personal freedom goes with personal responsibilities, and particularly where crime and sin are different issues. Again, it's not always the case. In many parts of the world, this combination of this overlapping, that what is thought to be a crime, in religious term, in social term, in whatever it is, or is connected to a sort of supposed sin by this or that religion. And that is exactly the basis of any kind of authoritarian regime, be it religious regime or other kind of regime. The difference is exactly the open society and the democracy based on personal freedom and responsibility. Now, in so doing, the same approach I've been taking with my radical friends in the Transnational Radical Party towards drugs is more or less the same that I took when I was campaigning, that time successfully, in legalizing abortion in my country, or legalizing divorce, or legalizing such other social behavior or social element, independently if I agree or disagree. But I simply think that the fact that social behaviors are better controlled and managed instead of pure prohibition. This seems to me a very simple, understandable reasoning, but at political level I found myself all my life in this particular sector, but not only, particularly alone. It's easier to campaign on prohibition. The only element that it doesn't work. Prohibition, simple prohibition doesn't work, and we all know. That is where science and scientific research comes in. This is a period in which we don't lack scientific research and results. In just the last few weeks, we had the Alice report. I understand there are some people here from the Alice organization. We had the London School of Economics reports on drugs. 2 years ago, we had the Global Commission on Drugs. We have elements and papers from Uruguay. We have elements and papers from some states in the United States who are trying to have another approach. Yet, this is very difficult to make it become a common, let's say, understanding, or at least a common will to open and healthy debate. I think that one of the reasons why we are losing, or we have been losing, because the adversary are becoming very, very clever. It just enough not to allow any proper debate to happen publicly, so that they limit you in sort of a converted exercise. I'm pretty sure that if we would be allowed in a TV on a proper open debate, we could win our case. I am definitely sure. So are the adversary. So the only thing they do everywhere in the world is that no proper public debate is, in any case, promoted. Democracy should promote proper debate and proper open debate. And that is, again, not the case. I'm just back from Tunisia. Tunisia is, of course, as you all know, in a transitional period. It's a fragile transition, but with some hopes. And yet, the putting people in jail for one joint of cannabis or hashish still is in Tunisia, even now, a way to criminalize dissent, mostly dissent from young people. And there is the most popular blogger, Hakim Aziz, who will face trial tomorrow, 23rd, today. And according to a law from Tunisia 1990, he has not even any kind of possibilities. The law is very firm, from 1 to 4 years of jail. There is no attenuante, there is no possibility. So according to the law, the judge has no other option than to put him and the 50 friends of him in jail. So limiting, in fact, the criminalizing marijuana or joints is sometimes also a way to criminalize dissidents or dissident opinions or young organizations, so on and so forth. The result is exactly like everywhere else. 2 points. The prohibitionist approach that applies to drugs, particularly in mainstream political parties, mainstream governments, mainstream whatsoever, who, by the way, in private tell you, in fact, we should do something. But they then don't dare to form a public opinion and to go public. They think, like in other social issues, that public opinion is not ready. But the question is exactly the opposite. Public opinion is not a static issue. It's an evolutionary system in which people respond also to the inputs that is being that is given to them. So the fact is that, and I think that when I was much younger, of course, and even more impatient than I am still am now, for legalizing abortion, the question was exactly the same point. The question is not to ask you if you are in favor or against. The fact is that the prohibition on abortion just gives rise to a clandestine and the black market, where again, people, healthy people go to London, poor people go to jail, more or less, or are exploited. And so the question is that it's better to make a regulated system in which individual freedom, individual choice is not only allowed, but also protected. It doesn't change much. We are back to the same basic, in my opinion, political approach of what kind of society do you want to build on? Do you want to build on a society with dogma, prejudices, where the science and research keeps telling you day by day, more and more, that simply the prohibitionist approach not only doesn't work, but it has counterproductive effect. In my country, out of a population in prison of more than 60,000, more than 30% are people in prison connected to small crimes relating to drugs, and on top of that, they are in jail waiting for trial. They are not in jail after a proper condemnation. They are in jail waiting for trial, which is, again, a violation of any kind of rule of law system, in which jail in prison is supposed to be, of course, after you have been proven guilty of, by the way, I don't know what, but anyhow, but you cannot be put in jail waiting for trial. And nevertheless, in my country, 30% of the population in jail out of 60,000, 30%, right, are people in jail, normally poor people. You don't have in jail big boss or narco dealer, be sure. Or if they go very, let's say, briefly, let's put it. You have a lot of people who are simply, jails are used in my country as a social dumping. You don't want to face a social issue, you take away the people, you put them in jail as much as you can. And again, that is another campaign that we are fighting on rule of law, on changing the law, on proper treatment in prison or elsewhere, referring to human being. So I'm afraid we are moving in a sort, most of us are coming from so-called proper democracy or long-term democracy. I'm afraid that day by day we are losing the essence of what it does mean living in an open society. We were so proud of our system because at the end democracy is the system that is supposed to be able to correct itself when proven wrong. That was what they taught me when I was a young girl at school, that it's not a perfect system, but at least it is a system that is open to correct itself when the policy are proven wrong. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen anymore, and the more we are wrong, the more we persist. I have been recently Minister of Foreign Affairs, and one of the things I wanted to do was to visit Uruguay. Not because I don't know about Uruguay, I know about Uruguay, but I wanted to make not a symbolic visit, but a visit of simply opening up a proper connection with Uruguay, with their reasoning, with their position, and so eventually opening up also sort of a debate in this country. Well, unfortunately, I couldn't do it, but I strongly believe that politicians, wherever they are, in parliament or in government, have some rooms to move. It's not popular. If you don't have a proper debate, if you want to run a legalization campaign, of course you lose the election. I say of course. Not because it is right, but because the adversary have the only possible space and the only possible message. And people feel more safe if it's just prohibited. They know it doesn't work. But in any case, because nobody explains to them what other policy you could do, how you could make things better for them and for the others. There is no miracle solution, of course, but yes, there is a starting point to stop criminalizing production and use, personal use. Carla has been telling you, I think, that recently, 1 week ago, we have a new law in Italy on cannabis. It's a really very, very timid step. But I think we should build on it because it proves that law can be changed. Not always for the better and not always, let's say, courageously enough. But it proves that, by the way, we were obliged to change our law because it was imposed on us by the Constitutional Court. And that is also one of the positive aspects in a democracy where you have different bodies, check and balances, in which when the parliament is totally stubborn, luckily you have another institution that brings you to order and try to say, listen, guy, cannot go like that. Check and balances are very important. We are a country that's, for instance, we have been prohibiting with a fantastic law any kind of assisted pregnancy. It was a damn famous law called Law Number 40. Again, we didn't win the referendum, but because of the heavy interference of the church in Italy. But the law now is totally destroyed, again by the Constitutional Court, who has been calling Parliament to order and declaring one article after the other, violating the Constitution. And now the law doesn't exist anymore. So we can, my message at the end of this very short speech is that we have to be able enough to use all kinds of tools. Scientific research, which is very, very important, public debate as much as possible, constitutional court, rule of law, the judiciary, and et cetera, et cetera. And eventually, one of the goals that we can set to ourselves is the incoming UNG General Assembly 2016. Trying to see if there is any way and possibilities to join forces with Uruguay or to join forces with other countries. No, I'm simply sick. Which is still allowed in my country. On a personal behavior, I mean. No, but I think we could at least join forces, not only among civil society and every kind of part in complex society, but also I think we can join forces with some member states and some states who will be part of the UN General Assembly. I even think that there are some moves in other Latin American countries, and even in Afghanistan. I had the privilege in 2005 to live in Afghanistan for 6 months as head of the observer electoral mission from the EU. And at the end I made a report, not only on the elections, but because in some part of Afghanistan we were unable to provide safety enough for people to go to vote. And one of the issues was not exactly and only the Taliban, was drug dealer plus Taliban plus. And in that report, I mentioned to all the capitals that one of the real issues that is making the Taliban and jihadis strong is the enormous amount of money that comes from poppy and poppy prohibition, poppy trade, and et cetera, who is also, by the way, affecting the other country of the region. Let's see what is happening now in Pakistan, or more recently, or Iran, where drug dealers and trafficking has been very prosperous, and now they are also becoming, even Iran, a country of consumption, which has never been the case till 10 years ago. But there was no way. The scientific data were there. Let's look where you have more violence is exactly in the zone which were poppy production and transformation. But there was no way. The common policy, even now, is prohibition or fumigation or substitution, crop substitution. But you know, crop substitution is very good in theory. It depends if it is economically viable for people and peasants, and normally it is not. Poppy has a high price, banana don't. If you cultivate poppy, people come and pick the poppies. If you cultivate banana, nobody comes to recolt and buy your bananas. So, I mean, it's not enough to be poor to be stupid enough not to make any rational calculation. Which has been, by the way, the failure when I was in Ecuador on the same mission. The fumigation in Colombia was just moving the coca production south in Ecuador, and then more south, and then more south. And subsidies coming from the EU on crop substitution made a perverse result. The same peasant had a subsidy for proper banana cultivation in one land, and it had a much more valuable coca cultivation in the other valley. The same peasant. So he got the subsidy from the EU to produce whatever it is, but it was living on the coca production on the next valley without subsidies. So I think that, again, because it is a very complex issue, doesn't have one single solution, and that's why we have to join forces. Consumers countries, producer countries, and I think that we have to keep in mind one of the possible dates, which is 2016. It's not such a long time. It's just after tomorrow if we want to get ready. And whatever me and my party and the Transnational Radical Party, whatever we can do, just please remember, we are interested, committed, we want to go on and forward in this issue. Thank you.